Hello my friends, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be reading your best books of 2024. I do this every year. It is always a fun way for me to find new books to get excited about. Books that maybe weren't on my radar previously. And while it's usually a mixed bag, I normally come out with a new favorite. So I am anticipating that that will be the case. And frankly, I need it. January has been kind of a slog for me. I feel like my mental health has been kind of not great, like 2 thumbs down. And I need something to pick me up and get me excited about reading again. That's what we're going to be doing in this video, is reading your 10 best books of 2024. I asked y'all on Instagram, I asked you via Google form, y'all gave me recommendations. I brought them all together and I figured out what the most popular selections were, and those are the books I'm going to be reading. The 2 books that were actually the most popular are actually books that I have already read, but by a landslide, Bride by Ellie Hazelwood and Just for the Summer were y'all's favorite books of 2024. Can't say I'm surprised, they were some of my favorite books of 2024, but obviously I'm not going to reread those because, you know, I already know I like them. I'm going to be reading your selections, and it's going to be interesting. We've got literary fiction, we've got horror, we've got romance, we've got fantasy, and I think we have some things in between. So it's going to be an interesting ride. I think there's actually only one true romance, so it is going to prove interesting, I'm sure. So we're gonna have fun together. We are going to get our January reading sorted, get back on track with our reading. Another little thing I will say that I have been doing to take care of myself this January is focusing on my mental health and my mental wealth. Like I said, January, a bit of a tough time for me personally. Holidays are over, the weather's gloomy, and I find myself having a hard time getting through the days, especially when they start at 5 p.m. I recently learned about this idea of mental wealth, which is a way that I have been looking at my mental health lately that has been very helpful this January. It's basically investing in habits today that make you more resilient in the future. It's not about trying to overhaul your entire existence, which, let's face it, is a little bit extreme, especially when you're kind of feeling down. It's more about creating a mental savings account that you can withdraw from when life gets tough. And it's something that you build up over time, right? In 5 important areas: sleep, diet, exercise, stress management, and exogenous compounds. And for me, building my mental wealth this January has been all about small changes that lead to bigger impacts and addressing roadblocks that have been coming up for me. So for me, focus and sleep are 2 things that I know will pay dividends in the future. Something that has been helping me a lot lately is Magic Mind, who are sponsoring this video. I've been using their focus shots for about a year now, and I have loved the boost that they have given my energy and my focus. If y'all know me, you know that I personally hate the taste and the effects of coffee, but a lot of days, especially around 3 p.m., I feel like I need a little bit of an energy boost, which is when I take a shot of Magic Mind's mental performance. I don't feel like I could lift a car or anything. It's not like this boost of energy that's going to shock your system. It just gives me the little boost that I need to finish editing videos and to get my work done. It's sustained, you don't feel like a big crash or anything like that, and it tastes really great. There's a few different ways to enjoy this, by the way. You can put this over ice. You can add it to a sparkling bevy if you're into that kind of thing. I just personally take it as a shot. And a more recent find for me is Magic Mind's sleep, which is something that I have also really been loving. I normally get decent sleep, but again, when my mental health is just kind of all over the place, my sleep just tends to be okay. And I have been using Magic Mind sleep for the past 3 weeks, and I have to say it has been helping me fall asleep a lot faster, and I feel like my sleep has been more deep as well. I love it because it tastes good, which is important to me. I don't want to have to force myself to drink something that I don't like, but it doesn't have melatonin in it, which I personally don't love to consume before bed. But what this does have, amongst other things, is magnesium glycinate, which is something that I was already taking in pill form before this, but I love that it is in here, and it's something that is really good for relaxing muscles, calming the nervous system, and if you work out regularly, magnesium is really, really great. It's actually a lifesaver. Love it. Your mental health and your mental wealth are super important, and there is no better time to start investing than now. Make 2025 the year that you build your mental resilience. Go to magicmind.com/chandlerjan to get 45% off the 24 hours pack, which has both focus and sleep shots. And thanks to Magic Mind for sponsoring this portion of today's video. Now let's get into the vlog portion of this video. Surprise! We're starting with a pregnancy. Not my own, clearly. The one that's happening in Ready or Not by Cara Stone. I decided to pick a surprise pregnancy romance novel first because, sorry, y'all didn't give me very many romance options. I'm craving a good romance, okay? So I'm 50% into this book. I've got thoughts. This story is about our main character, Eve, and at the very beginning of the book, lets us know that she's pregnant by a guy that she hooked up with. Doesn't really hook up with people very often, and she hasn't hooked up with anyone really in the past year, except for this guy named Ethan. So she knows very quickly that this is his baby, and she's gonna have to track him down and let him know that she is pregnant. There's really no question on whether or not Eve is going to keep the baby. She is in her, I want to say late 20s, maybe early 30s. She doesn't really have her life totally together, but but she's not a hot mess either. She is working at a conservation place, doing like behind the scenes work. She's not writing like grant proposals or anything like that. She is literally just doing behind the scenes work, and she is like dying to advance in her career. It's just not totally happening for her. She does live alone though. She is like, fairly financially secure. She does live in Brooklyn and she's about to have a baby. So, her financial situation is going to get a little probably interesting as things carry on, but that's besides the point. The other cast of characters that comes in to make this book interesting and not just, a story simply about Eve would be Shep, Ethan, and Willa. Ethan is the baby daddy. He actually kind of, I don't want to say stepped out of his relationship to have sex with Eve, but he is in a long-term committed relationship with someone, and I want to say they were maybe on a break, but he is very much in love with the woman that he is currently with, and so he doesn't really know how he wants to be there for Eve. He wants to be there for her, but he's just not really sure how this is going to fit in the equation of his life, so he kind of comes in and out of the book. Very sweet guy. He does nice things for Eve, but you can tell that's not like the romantic relationship here. The romantic relationship is going to be between Eve and her best friend Willa's brother, Shep. He is living with his sister. I can't exactly remember the reason why, but he has been there for Eve ever since she found out that she was pregnant. He just provides this like levity, this comedy, this kindness and caring that our heroine's really missing from the people around her. We find out pretty early in the book that our heroine's parents both passed away because they were in their 50s when they had her, so she is kind of alone going through this pregnancy. She could rely on her best friend Willa, except Willa is not really sure how she feels about Eve, given that Willa has been trying to conceive for a couple of years and it's just not really happening for her. So her reception to Eve's pregnancy is not necessarily the best at the beginning of the book. I'm not entirely sure if I loved how that was handled, but Eve's kind of feeling alone, not totally alone. It's not like Willa has disappeared or been a total bitch or anything, but she just doesn't feel as supported as she could. So Shep is really being there for Eve, and I think that's where the romance is going to come in. It hasn't really come in. I can definitely tell there's an attraction between the two of them. I know that Eve likes Shep and vice versa. I don't know how this is going to play out with the fact that Eve is pregnant. I don't think that's going to get in the way of these two getting together, but I'm just wondering like how it's going to happen when Eve has the baby, because I think she's in her second trimester, this middle part of the book, so it seems like she's gonna have the baby before the book is over. But that's just a rundown of like what the plot is of this book. I really didn't know what to expect going into this. I didn't know this is going to be a surprise pregnancy book. I probably should have guessed from the cover and also the fact that it's called Ready or Not. I'm fairly oblivious to those sorts of things, so I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. I've read some interesting things about this book. So many of y'all love this book and said this is one of the best of the year. Clearly that's why I'm reading it, but the Goodreads reviews are kind of mixed. Some people are saying this isn't truly a romance. It felt like just a story about a woman who kind of falls in love. I mean, like, is that not any romance? But I understand what you're saying. I think some of y'all are saying that this book leans more women's fic than romance, and honestly, that's something I used to have more of an issue with than I do now. But I'll be curious to see if I'm satisfied with the romance, I guess, at the end of this book. So far, like my actual thoughts about what's going on. Into Shep. I like him as a character. I am definitely being sold on this book because of his character. I feel like Eve is not too annoying. She's fairly responsible, but I am sometimes annoyed at how flippant she is, I guess, in certain situations. Like, okay, at the beginning of the book, her best friend does not react well to her pregnancy for very obvious reasons, and our heroine definitely knows those reasons, and yet she kind of, like, in her internal dialogue, makes it seem like her friend should just get over it. And that's probably my unkind interpretation of it, just given my own personal life experience. It's very clear that like Eve knows how her friend Willa is doing. She doesn't seem to feel very sympathetic, I guess, towards her, especially like as the book carries on. Willa is just not able to get pregnant. I don't know. I wish that they would have like more honest and open conversations, and that just doesn't seem to really be happening. Like this book does have like a unique opportunity to be able to say something about that relationship dynamic and how that plays out. And I'm not saying that it's this book's responsibility to do that, but I just think it would be cool if that was explored maybe a little bit, especially considering Willa is Eve's best friend. So yeah, I don't know. This is not a very romantic book, I will say, at the 50% mark. Like, kind of just figuring out what Eve's life is going to look like and how she's like fearful but excited for this pregnancy and like trying to navigate these relationships. It's a very pleasant read. I'm not like swooning yet. I'm getting hints of that with Shep, but I'm not like totally there. I'm not totally sold. I'm gonna finish the book though, probably have final thoughts and feelings about it then, hopefully. I don't want to feel this way throughout the entire video, just being like 50% update, I'm reading it, I don't know how I feel. But lately that's just been how I have been feeling about books. There haven't been very many books that have sold me from the jump lately, and I want to be honest about that. That just is kind of the case. Okay, so I finished it and it was cute. I did actually end up enjoying this one, and I'm glad we started off a good one, because the next book we're going to talk about, I'm not sure if it's for me. I'm 20% into that one, and I don't think anything major is going to happen between 20 and 50%, so I'm going to update you on it. So let's talk about Ready or Not. I think that it was fun for what it was, and for a pregnancy romance, like, I didn't hate it, which is hard for me. I feel like pregnancy and romance can be really, really hit or miss, leaning towards the miss side. Because I feel like authors tend to just like pepper it into something casual, and pregnancy is not something that is casual, even if it happens by chance. So I like the way that it was handled in this book. There were elements that I didn't like as well, which is why I can't give this book 5 stars, but I think the shining thing about this book is the romance. Shep and Eve were so cute together. I loved that Eve kind of just slowly started realizing her feelings, and then it kind of like snuck up on her all at once, and she felt like she couldn't wait another minute to tell Shep that she was into him. I like that he was so all in. Even though Eve was pregnant with another man's baby, he was like, I don't give a shit. I like you. I want to be here for you and this baby. Like, I'm all in. And I also actually enjoyed how Ethan's role in this book kind of evolved. I wasn't sure like what I wanted from him. I wasn't sure if I wanted him to be there for Eve or if I didn't want him there at all, since like Shep was going to be the father figure. But like, it's nice when the baby's father wants to be involved. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that like there is involvement from Ethan at the end of the book. I like the way that that was handled. I felt like it was mature and also realistic. Like the way that everything was handled, it wasn't flawless, it wasn't seamless, but it made sense for these characters, and I liked that. Things that I didn't like about this book though definitely made this to where I couldn't give it 5 stars. So let me try to detail that. I think the biggest thing for me was that there was a little bit of a disconnect here with what this book was trying to accomplish, I guess. Like, yes, there's certainly a romantic element, which, you know, I loved with Shep and Eve, but I think that there were a lot of other plot lines that were kind of sprinkled in that didn't get the full shine that they maybe deserved. I think there were just too many things going on in this book, and I think it's realistic to life, certainly. I think this book might have been just a little bit more successful had it like whittled down some of the side plots and stuck to maybe like a couple of main plots or threads that we needed to tie up, right? I think for me, I would have preferred to see more of Ethan, more of the job, maybe just more of, I don't know. I'm doing a terrible job at like really critiquing this book. There was just a lot going on. I wanted things to be more fleshed out. Let's put it that way. Then another plot line that I don't think was handled very well was the plot line with Willa. Some really mixed feelings about this as someone who has experienced similar things as Willa. I don't feel like our heroine was there enough for her friend. Sure, you could argue that Willa like wasn't there for Eve as much as she could have been when she announced her pregnancy. It was a little bit short-sighted of Eve to get like upset in her head about it, because it was very clear to us that there was more going on, and Willa finally like breaks down near the end of the book and kind of tells, you know, her feelings and what's been going on, and it was all very reasonable. I wish we could have gotten that earlier so that we could have seen more of Willa being a supportive friend. I just feel like this book kind of painted Willa to be not a villain, but just like not as good of a friend as I think that she was trying to be. And then Eve also just like didn't look like a very good friend. Both things realistic for sure. Like I think a lot of this book was very realistic. I just feel like it had too many different parts, too many different moving parts for it to be 5 stars. Okay, I'm not gonna bitch about it because I did like it. I thought it was a fun book. I think I was just getting like too into it and wanting more from it, if that makes sense. Let's talk about Blue Sisters. I didn't expect to be for me. This and Intermezzo, I don't expect to be for me, because let's be honest, I'm not a literary girl. I don't like depressing things, just not really my cup of tea, but I'm trying to give this book a fair shot. So this is about 4 sisters. I know, shocking. Who would have thought that the title would tell us what the book's about? Technically 3 since one of them is deceased, but it's about the relationship between 4 sisters and how their, yes, relationship with each other has sort of colored the rest of their lives. We get point of view chapters from the 3 sisters who are alive, and they're all dealing with the grief of the loss of one of their sisters in different ways. They're relating to each other in very different ways. Some of the sisters have better relationships with each other than others. Some of the sisters have like substance abuse problems. One of the sisters ended up quitting her job and is doing something different now. Like everybody's just kind of like going through things, dealing with things differently, having, I was gonna say hard conversations with each other. I think a lot of these people are very avoidant, so maybe not that, but we're kind of unraveling the history of these people and their relationships. I mean, it's a literary fiction novel, so I feel like kind of nothing's happening, and the things that are happening are really just basic human interactions that we are supposed to find profound, that we are supposed to gain something from. And I don't know that I am. I never really do, to be honest, with literary fiction. It's just not a genre that I tend to fuck with heavily. I think the introduction of this book sets up this premise of this idea that like sisters have this relationship that is so different from friendship, but is stronger than any other relationship really out there. I'm not really seeing that on full display here. That'll happen as the book carries on, but I don't know. I feel uneasy and melancholy reading this book. I don't know that this is really the vibe that I wanted. The day before the inauguration, like I just, no, it's just not the kind of upbeat shit that I tend to pick up, but I'm trying to give it a fair shot, a fair shake, because I think that, you know, there's a reason that people are enjoying this book. I just don't know. I just don't know about this one. I read a Goodreads review that said like, close enough, welcome back, Little Women. I guess it's kind of that, kind of like a modern day Little Women. I think I'm just trying to kill time here because I don't really have profound thoughts or like concrete feelings about this book, except for to say that if you're looking for something that is gonna spoon feed you emotion, this isn't necessarily doing that, which I can appreciate. I also don't know that it's doing a whole lot. Maybe I need to just like immerse myself in this while I immerse myself in my bath. Hey friends, much to talk about. Firstly, let's just, like it is, call it as I see it. I'm DNFing Blue Sisters. I don't know how else to say it. It's not working for me. And I have a really hard time DNFing books, especially if they are for videos like this. I think I need to be better about that because otherwise you are going to have to sit through videos from me where I'm just bitching the entire time. And I don't want to be that person. I'm not saying that I'm going to change my level of honesty in these videos, but I don't think it's fun for me or for you to watch a video where I'm just complaining the entire time, so I'm not going to do that. I think that literary fiction, just generally speaking, is typically not for me. This is not a book that I would have picked up on my own. I picked it up because it was recommended so many times by all of you, and I'm glad that I gave it a shot just to see if it was going to work for me, but after picking it up, within the first couple of chapters, I just had this feeling and I continued to try to push on. It just wasn't working for me. Kind of walking, I was gonna say walking through glue. That's not really a good analogy, but it was an uphill battle that I was not winning with this book. I feel like this book isn't very long, but it was a real slog to get through some chapters, so I DNF'd it at like 40%, and I'm feeling confident about that decision. I think that if you like literary fiction and you like stories that are tough, you know, talking about tough relationships or grief or relationship between sisters, like I'm sure this is going to be for you. You know, I think if you're a lit fic girly, you probably know what you're into, you know, and you've probably picked this up or it's on your radar. So I don't feel like I really need to defend it to you, but it's not for me. There is, however, a book that is for me. I'm loving it. Didn't expect to. Sword of Kaigen is what I'm reading right now. 50% in, and this fucks. This is so fun. It just reminds me of the fact that I need to pick up more fantasy. Every year, I feel like I say that, like, oh, I just need to read more fantasy. And it's not until I'm forced to for videos that I pick it up, and I almost always love it. I think it's really great. Probably my second favorite genre right under romance. I'm eating this up, okay? I'm listening to the audiobook, which I think is a great way to consume this story. Wasn't sure if audiobook versus Kindle would be better, but audiobook has been great. Okay, so this book is about the Matsuda family mostly, and it is set in Kaigen. Kaigen is a peninsula that is, I would say, modeled mostly after Japan, although I'm sure there are other influences in the story since it's like a fictional fantasy world, but the Matsuda family lives in kind of the forest reaches, and they are a part of this one particular part of the empire that is far removed in terms of technology, in terms of their proximity to like the main part of the empire, but they are in charge of, I guess, protecting the empire from bad guys, right? So everybody here is like really good at combat. They have the powers of like ice, like they can conjure ice basically and like throw ice spears at people, like very cool shit. And this particular family is known to be like amazing warriors. People that we're following from this family are a mother and a son. I love her. I love Misaki so much. But let's talk about her son Mamoru first. He is a 14-year-old boy. At the start of the story, he is attending a school with a foreigner. I wouldn't even say foreigner, but like someone from a different part of the country, traveled around a lot and knows a lot. And he has been telling Mamoru that like the things that he thinks that he knows about his country and the relationship with the empire and kind of like what we're fighting for is very different than we have been told. This is definitely shaping Mamoru to be a little bit more cautious and or question his place in the world. Like he has this amazing power, he is training his amazing power, but he's starting to question if he should be listening to his father, who is kind of withholding and shitty. So he's got his own thing going on. He plays a pretty big part in the fight that we just saw, this like invasion that happens that is very robust on page. We also have Mom Misaki, who is so fucking cool. I don't think I can do her character justice, but she is this woman who has a formal like fighting training. She is from a different place and she like marries into this family because it's what her family wanted for her, but she has formal fighting training, and in other parts of the country, women are part of the armed forces, just not in this like, I don't want to say backwater province, but like this area where it's only men who can fight and the women are just supposed to have babies. So Misaki is trying to find fulfillment in motherhood. She's had multiple sons back to back and she just doesn't really feel a connection to her family like she does with the sword, and she gets an opportunity to pick that sword back up when there are invasions. It's fucking sick. It's very cool. I like about this story so much is you're immediately drawn in to the characters. You are immediately sympathetic towards the characters. You want to know everything that they don't know. You're so drawn in to the way that the pacing of this book, just such an ease of getting into the story that I think is genuinely unparalleled. It can be kind of hard for me sometimes getting into a fantasy world, feeling a little bit confused about the magic system, not understanding character motivations. I'm not having that problem in this book. I love the characters. I want to see what happens next. Misaki is such a fucking cool character. I love seeing this person who feels pulled in different directions. Like, she thinks and she knows she should be a good mother, but like she doesn't really feel cold towards it, and getting to see her be a badass has been so fun. And I also like this little 14-year-old kid, like his character, and like watching him have to decide again, if he wants to listen to his father and the people around him, or if he wants to expand his worldview and learn more. His mom, I should say, also knows a little bit more about the world than the family that she has married into, and she does kind of bestow some of that wisdom upon her son. So in the scene that I just read, I say scene, it was a giant swath of the book. There is an invasion from their adversaries who have, I want to say, like fire magic. I'm curious what the aftermath of this is going to be. I think right now I'm reading like a chapter in the past for Misaki's character, so we like haven't really gotten to the full repercussions of like what just happened, but we are going to, and I'm into it. I'm so into it. I didn't think I would be. Like, none of what I'm telling you sounds like shit I'd be into, but I think for me, a good story transcends my genre preferences. I think that's what we're learning. Excellent pacing, good characters. You can do anything with that, and I fuck with it. You know, by contrast, literary fiction doesn't really work for me because typically not much happens, and it's sad, and it's just not, it's not for me, okay? It's not for me. This is really good, and I'm glad that I'm finally getting around to reading it because everybody said so good, and I'm like, okay. Cover doesn't really appeal to me. I mean, it is a beautiful cover, but I'm just like, okay, whatever. Looking good. Okay, I am gonna finish this. I'm gonna curl up in my little bed with my cats. I'm gonna finish this, and then we're going to move on to another book. My allergies are acting up, which is probably why I also sound congested. Up to Zyrtec. Hopefully that shit kicks in soon so we don't have to listen to this anymore. But I finished the Sword of Kaigen. I'm 50% into the Sunshine Court, so that means we have things to talk about. First, let's talk about the Sword of Kaigen. Both pleased and disappointed at the same time. I think ultimately, I enjoyed this book, and I'm glad that I picked it up. Don't know that I would have on my own, and I'm glad that y'all encouraged me to, telling me it was your favorite book of 2024. But I am disappointed because from about the 70% on, the pacing just kind of falls off a cliff with this book. And that was really disappointing to me, knowing how action-packed the middle part of this book was. Absolutely loved the characters. I loved all of the action, again, in the middle part of the book. But as the book carries on, action kind of disappears, and you have characters sort of reeling from the events that happen in the middle of the book. And I'm not saying that I, hate when characters reflect or when they have to deal with the aftermath of challenging situations. Like, I actually kind of enjoy that in books. I think it's realistic, especially when you've got like war in stories. I think it only makes sense that we would have that present, but I feel like it dragged a little bit too long in the latter part of this book. I feel like there were some things that happened that I just like ultimately didn't care about. So that's tough for me. Like, this isn't going to be a 5-star book because of that. That feels disappointing because I love the characters so much. Like, I wanted this to be a 5-star. Also, like, something really shocking and surprising happens, which I was not expecting at all. I'm impressed that I was so shocked. I don't know. I'm thinking like 4 stars for this book. I did like it. I did ultimately like it. Even the weird pacing at the end of the book couldn't stop this from being like a highly rated book for me. Like, it actually was really solid. Probably one of my favorite fantasy books that I read in 2024. Girl, it's 2025. Let's talk about the new bombshell in the villa, The Sunshine Court by Nora Sakovic. This is the 4th book in the All for the Game series, which is about a fictional sport called Xe. Also, that's not really what the books are about. It's kind of twisty books, and all of the characters have like dark pasts, and I don't know that I could ever really sum up what these books are, but I can sum up what the vibes are, okay? I've read the original trilogy. It's one of my favorite book series, and it's been years since I've read them, so I was excited to pick up this book. Excited, but also nervous. The vibes of these books, I would say. If you are a fanfiction lover, you spent a lot of your time looking at fan edits on Tumblr in the 2010s, I think this is a series for you. The books definitely have a very slow burn element. The main character in the original trilogy, his name is Neil Jostin. He has a kind of troubled past, and he, at the beginning of the series, is asked to join this Xe, the fictional sport, this Xe team in South Carolina, and all of the other people on the team have troubled pasts as well, and they're sort of the underdogs of the sports world, but the coach of the team is hoping to make them great. And so the series is about found family. There is a very, very slow burn romance. There is exploration of trauma. There's like a mafia element to the story. Like, it's kind of wild, kind of fun. It's actually a whole lot of fun. And there are just so many iconic moments in the original trilogy that, like, I don't know, I remember reading those books on a vacation back to back. I think I had seen talk about the books on Goodreads, and I was like, I don't know what the fuck this is, but I think I'm gonna download the books. Downloaded all 3, read them back to back, and I was just hooked. I was so hooked. I was like, I get the hype. I totally get the hype. It's definitely not a series for everybody. The writing is not amazing. I think Kayla read these last year, which like crazy. Anyway, I liked them. I decided to pick this book up because so many of y'all apparently really liked it. I was tentatively excited when I heard this book was coming out, but it's been such a long time since I read the trilogy. I didn't know if it would have the same impact, and I gotta say, 50% in, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Sunshine Court is not about the characters from the original trilogy. That XE team are the Palmetto State Foxes, and this series or book, I don't know if it's going to turn into a series, this book about a character who used to be on like the best XE team in like this universe, the Edgar Allan Ravens. That team was abusive and horrible to him, and now he is escaping from that university against his will. Actually, he is like taken injured from that team, isolated, and he gets to kind of like pick where he goes next. Kind of he's going to be going to USC and joining the Sunshine Court. He'll be joining this other team who has a completely different way of doing things, and he is going to presumably heal from some of the trauma that he has endured at the hands of his former team. I don't want to get into all of the details of that, but he was verbally and physically abused by his coach and coach's, is it son, grandson? Not entirely sure. One of the other players on the team. And it is like very much okay in this world. Not really, but okay by this team. And our main character, Jean, puts up with this treatment because he's basically sold to XE team, the Edgar Allan Ravens. It sounds corny when I say it, and it kind of is, but anyway, he tolerates this abuse because that's all he's ever known. And he now at this 50% mark is in USC or at USC. He's being introduced to players and how they do things, and it's very clear that he doesn't know how to interact with people. He doesn't really know how to, I don't want to say think for himself, but kind of like they were very much under the control of that evil coach at the old school. Very confused. He doesn't know how to handle this, and they're trying to accommodate some of his requests so that he can like live similarly to an extent how he did at his last school, but it's not the same. I don't need to tell you all the details really, because I know that not many of you are going to be interested in picking this book up if you haven't read the original series, but I can say as someone who really enjoyed the first 3 books that this is different for sure, but it is interesting seeing a new, fresh perspective. Neil had his own traumas that he was working through in that original trilogy, and John has his own things that he's going through as well. He also has like a complicated relationship with sexuality and sex, which, I mean, characters in the other series do as well. Pepper's really trying to get under these covers, and I'm trying to support his endeavors. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like if there's a romance going on. I just am really invested in seeing him interact with these like upbeat, smiley people. Because even the people in the original trilogy, like they're not upbeat, smiley people. Like those people have dealt with their own hardships and abuse and are healing from it, and like kind of doing that through sport. This is very a fish out of water situation, and it's interesting to see how that contrasts, I guess, with the original trilogy. So far, I'm enjoying it. We're also getting the perspective of a character named Jeremy, who is the captain of the USC Trojans XE team. And I think there's going to be a relationship between Jeremy and John, but I'm not entirely sure. Fingers crossed, though. I like a good slow burn, angsty romance, and Nora Sakovic delivers. So I'm gonna go. God damn, I hope this Zyrtec kicks in. Silent review. I fucking love the Sunshine Court. I feel like this should come as a shock and a surprise to no one because of how hard I rode for the Foxhole Court whenever I read that series, and I feel like I recommended the shit out of it, you know, back in the day. This was phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed this. I don't think this is for everyone. In fact, I would caution you against reading it. I think that's how I feel about a lot of books, because my taste in books is pretty singular. I like things that have elements that might bother other people. I don't care as much about whether a book is technically perfect. I want a book to evoke feeling in me, and this one did. There is no on-page assault, but there is a lot of mention of assault, or maybe not even a lot of mention, but heavily implied that one of the characters in this book has dealt with some pretty horrendous things in their past. It does come up as something later on in the book, so would caution you against reading it if that is triggering to you, but thought the way that trauma was handled in this book felt realistic. I always really appreciate this author for being pretty unflinching when it comes to trauma, and I'm not always saying that like it's handled in the best way or that it's like exactly how a therapist would handle it or anything like that, but the things that Jean goes through in this book and the way that he acts after having gone through something horrific, it felt very true to life. Like at the end of the book, he's not cured, he's not like better. He is slowly starting to trust people. He is slowly starting to heal. It's going to take a long time for him to heal. And it was really gratifying, I think, to read about. I don't know, I liked it. I liked the new cast of characters too. I liked the 2 women that John was living with. I really enjoyed Jeremy's character. I really hope that Jeremy and John can be together. I don't know. I don't know what to say about this book other than I really love this, and I don't know that there's gonna be a book that tops this for me. I think of the books that we've read so far, this is definitely up there for me. I think Sword of Kaigen after that. And what else did we read? Oh, I DNF'd Blue Sisters. And is that it? Oh, and then Ready or Not. I would say, so far, not that I was even intending to rank books for this video, and I've got my cats running around in the background. It's chaotic. That Pepper over here. I'm gonna say Sunshine Court, Sword of Kaigen, Ready or Not, Blue Sisters, because I DNF'd it. But let's talk about a book that I am 50% of the way into, shall we? I picked up The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. I have attempted to read a Robert Jackson Bennett book before, but didn't totally love it. It was a heist novel, and it just wasn't gripping me. I don't know if I DNF'd it or gave it 3 stars, but I don't really remember much of that book. This one's interesting. This is about our 2 main characters, Din and Anna. Din is kind of like the eyes and ears for this woman who is like an investigator, and at the start of the story, we find out that someone has been like infected with something that makes a tree grow out of their stomach and like kills them. And we're trying to figure out who did the poisoning, what this poison is it contagious? Like, we don't know anything about it, but that's kind of what's going on. Anna is an interesting character. She is reclusive. I think she is like supposed to be autistic or like coded as neurodivergent. Is frequently overstimulated, so she stays at home. She wears a blindfold most of the time. She relies on Din to collect information on her behalf. And I don't know if he's like a formal part of like the police or anything, but like he works for her, helps her, he's her eyes and ears. What do they call him? Not a scribe, but something like that. Like he has almost like a photographic memory. He remembers everything he sees and he can report that back to her. And I would say the world itself and the way that this book feels is very, I want to say Grisha coded, but it's a not super high fantasy sort of setting. It feels kind of like dark and not grim dark, but just like a little bit of a dark setting. We have a mystery plotline. So this is like a mystery fantasy is what I'm trying to say. I would say piss poor job at describing the book, but I'm not. It's just like my experience reading it has been a little bit weird, and so I feel like I'm not really conveying how this book feels because the feeling is just a little weird. It's different than anything I've read before. I can certainly say that. Feelings about it. I don't know that I like mysteries in fantasy. I am more curious about like this world. I am more curious about the magic that's happening, although there's not a ton of magic. It's not like, you know, this crazy built out world. I think I care more about that than I do about the mystery, though I do kind of enjoy the characters of Din and Anna. I think I like Anna more. She's like a little more interesting to me. Characters aren't super well fleshed out, but like, I don't know. I'm not sure how to feel about this one. I am tentatively interested. I think, you know, if I'm drawing some similarities between this and the book that I read from this author, I think that I just don't like connect with his writing a ton. It's not a bad book. I'm just kind of like not even passively listening. I'm just like not invested, I guess is what I would say. Pleasant to read. I can tell objectively it's decent. I'm not obsessed, I think is what I would say. This is just not like my kind of fantasy. I didn't think that Sword of Kaigen would be either, but like that one was, right? It had like a little bit more going for it. I liked the magic. I liked the characters. The plot was amazing. This I'm like, okay. I don't know if I like a mystery in my fantasy. My cats are. Also, what have you been doing this? Has he been sitting here this whole time? Anyway. I'm gonna finish this book, I guess, and hopefully I'll have more concrete things to say then. I feel like this whole video has been such a mixed bag, and I don't think this normally happens when I read your favorite books of a given year. I feel like typically, I don't want to say I dislike all of the books, but I tend to not gel with the majority of them, and then there's maybe like 1 or 2 gems that I happen to give 5 stars. This time around, I feel like it has been up and down. It's like good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. And I'm not intentionally choosing books in that way. I'm not thinking, okay, I think I'm gonna like this book, let's read this one, and like, let's temper it with a book that I think I'm not going to enjoy. Also, that being said, like, I haven't really hated the majority of the books that y'all have sent my way, so we're gonna consider this a win so far, you know? I think things could go poorly from here, but I don't think so. I think we're on the right track. So first, let's talk about Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is what I finished last night. It feels like forever since I have read that book because I've since started and gotten halfway into 2 other books, but I'm only gonna talk to you about one of them at the moment. But first, let's talk about Robert Jackson Bennett. So this one, I mean, I kind of predicted it yesterday, was not perfect for me. I think that this is like a 3-star read, and I think it's just this author's writing. Like, I don't think that he does a poor job with what he is setting out to do. They just tend to not be my cup of tea. You know, the 2 that I've read from him, one was a heist novel, which tends to be hit or miss for me, and then this being a mystery fantasy, I don't know, I did not totally care to be frank with you. I didn't care much about the mystery elements of the story. I didn't really like the way that this society was set up either. I don't know what it is about like different levels of copiness that I didn't really care about, to be honest. It just like was not, wasn't for me. I did, again, like on his character. I thought Din was okay. I could have done without the romance that came in at the latter part of the book. Ultimately, this was just fine. Like, it's a 3-star read for me. Nothing that I hated, nothing that I loved. I'll be honest with you, I don't want to say forgotten it, but it's not a book that's going to have a lot of longevity in my mind. So it is what it is. And I can understand why people enjoy this because it does feel different than a lot of the fantasy books that I have read. And, you know, maybe if you are someone who likes both like Sherlock Holmesy mysteries and fantasy, this might be for you. But for me, it was just middle of the road. So I don't want to talk about it too much more than that. Let's talk about The Wedding People. This book, I'm not gonna lie, I was in no way interested in picking it up. I kept seeing this book everywhere. It's like a Jenna's book club pick. It's one of those books that just gets really, really hyped. Kind of similar to A Blue Sisters, where I know it's not a romance. I know it is not a stuffy historical fiction or, you know, really highbrow literary fiction book. And so I'm just kind of left wondering, I don't want to say what's the point because I also don't know that there is a point to books at all except for to entertain and or to maybe educate us. We don't need to get into the weeds of that. I have a hard time with books like this. Buzzy books that are targeted towards a female audience that aren't romance. That's my own hang up, and I don't really know where it comes from, except for I tend not to enjoy books that fit into this sort of realm, okay? I picked this book up, and the first 50 pages, I wanted to throw it across the room, I won't lie. I was a little bit pissed that this was recommended, that people liked this so much. I was like, is this Midnight Library Part 2? Is that what we're dealing with here, okay? Our main character is going through a hard time, and I don't want to spoil it because I read the synopsis of this book, and it is a little bit unclear what the story is about, and so I don't want to spoil it, okay? I'm not gonna spoil it, but our main character, Phoebe, has gone through a bit of a challenging time. She has been cheated on by her husband. She has had fertility struggles, and she is now single and kind of in shambles, I guess. Like, her life is just not going the way that she wanted it to, and she doesn't really know where to go from here, except for to go to this very fancy hotel where she is going to relax, hang out, and I guess ultimately, like, I don't say figure things out, but she's going to this hotel that she's always wanted to go to and hasn't been able to go to because her husband didn't have any interest in it, and she's like, you know what, it's finally the time to do this. So she goes, and while she's there, she ends up meeting this woman who is hosting a wedding at this hotel. Phoebe ended up getting the only room in the entire hotel that is not being booked by members of the wedding party or people that are attending the wedding. Lila, the person who, you know, is in charge of the wedding, the bride, duh, is annoyed that Phoebe is there, but they end up striking up this really interesting friendship. I completely have changed my mind about how I feel about this book. I didn't think that I would. I didn't think that this would be something that would grip me, but the writing is so funny. I have been laughing out loud reading this book, and I don't know if it's definitely the author's intent to make this funny, but it's kind of a dry humor that I am just kind of loving. And here's the thing, this book initially handles certain topics, I was kind of I was just uncertain about it, to be honest. I really didn't want to read about a woman who's dealing with infertility and like a shitty life. And that's not to say that those books shouldn't exist or it's bad to include those in books. I'm just saying, like, I personally, as someone who deals with infertility, didn't want to read about it. I didn't want to read that this woman was, you know, struggling in that way, personally. I don't think I was mentally prepared for that going into this book. I didn't know where we were going to be going, and I still don't know where we're going with this book. I thought this book would be. It is not. Even if it is in some ways a little Midnight Library-ish, we do have so much humor and so much chaos that I'm able and willing to overlook the fact that this is one of those books that's trying to show you that your like life is worth living, you know? Which is nice. It's nice to know that there is a book out there in this vein that I don't loathe. And I think it's the humor that's really doing it for me. So I begrudgingly say that y'all are kind of right so far. So far, I'm fucking digging this book. And I don't know if there's anything that really could derail it for me. I don't know if there's anything that would make this book not something that I'm into. I think even if it ends kind of cheesy, I think that would be fine. I will say, I'm noticing that there's going to be a little bit of chaos in this story because Phoebe is like in the hot tub one night flirting with someone, and she doesn't realize until that interaction is over who that person is. And I think that might cause some chaos and some drama as the book carries on. I kind of don't anticipate it being like the main crux of the story or like the main issue, I guess, that ends up happening in this book. So that's why I'm kind of like, I don't know where we're going from here, but I'm along for the ride. I'm along for the ride, and I'm digging that. Okay, so I finished The Wedding People, and I really enjoyed this book. I wasn't expecting it, like I said in the last clip, and I really wasn't sure where the plot line of the story was going, but this wrapped up about as perfectly as it could have. There were a few things that gave me pause, and I thought would have maybe cheapened the story had the author gone in a different direction. direction. I think there was a typical direction that this author could have taken, but she didn't, and I appreciated that. I felt like everything was just really well thought out, really well considered, and this is the kind of book that does have a lesson and good messages in it, but is not trying to spoon feed you those messages, and I really appreciate that. I think that this, in contrast with something like The Midnight Library, doesn't feel so corny, and that's the thing. It's like I'm not above having like a heartwarming story. I'm not above listening to a story where, you know, someone is going through a really hard time and is growing from that and is coming out on top in the end. Like, I'm not above that, but I think often the way that it's executed in a lot of these stories that tend to get really popular, it just tends to not work for me. This one did. This one really did work for me, and I think I'm going to chalk it up mostly to the humor. I think this book was incredibly funny. I liked Phoebe as a character too. She didn't irritate me. I didn't like the way she was described at the beginning of the book, but I think that's kind of the point. I think as the book carries on, she gains a confidence that is fun to read about. So I really liked this, and I think this is going to go right below The Sunshine Court for me. Honestly, they're probably neck and neck. Am I going to give this book 5 stars? I think I am. Let's talk about The Will of the Many though. I decided to listen to this on audio just because I knew it would be quicker for me to get through, frankly, than the physical copy, which I also own. This is a book that I was going to pick up on my own at some point, but like with most fantasy books, I have the best of intentions of picking them up, and it takes me years and years to get to the book, even if I buy it physically. So it is what it is. I am who I am. I should probably apologize for that. That's not like a great trade to have, buying books and then not reading them. But this book is fun, actually, and I'm quite enjoying it. I didn't know what to expect going into it. I had heard that it was one of the best fantasy books a lot of my friends had read, and a lot of my friends are not fantasy readers, so expected to perhaps enjoy this. This book's about our main character, Viz, I want to say his name is. I was kind of blanking for a second, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. He is an orphan. He is a fighter, and he also, I think, like something to do with the prison system at the beginning of the book. Basically, he's just trying to survive in a mean, cruel world that doesn't really want much to do with him. He is someone who still has all of his will intact, and in this society, humans give up their will to different people of different ranks, if that makes sense. So are like ranked by number, I guess. Like you have a particular number put on you, particular caste, I guess, in a sense, and that determines how much will you have. At the very bottom have the will of one man. The people at the very top have the will of like millions of men, which means that they are more powerful, they control more things. They'll have to like cede their will, basically, like give their will up to others. Will is an interesting word for it, but that is what we're calling it. And it is not just like your actual will. It's like, you know, beyond that. There's like some magic kind of shit going on with it too, but you know, anyway. Our main dude, Vis, he does not want to give up his will, even though this is something that is not allowed really, unless you're like in certain positions of power or whatever. Anyway, he, after a series of events, becomes adopted by someone who is pretty powerful. He is a senator, and the senator needs Vis is going to help determine what killed the senator's either friend or brother. I can't remember exactly which, to be honest. He's going to figure out what happened to this guy whenever he was attending the academy that Vis is going to go to. So Vis is going to get an education. He is not going to have to cede his will because people who go to this academy don't have to do that. They're going to train him up. He's going to become a man of decent rank and society. Also going to figure out what happened to the guy who adopted him's friend / brother. I don't remember which. So you've got a little bit of like a dark academia thing, because we got this guy going to the school, and the school is kind of fucked up. It's kind of brutal. There's like a maze situation at the school. I'm doing a great job of describing this. What is it with me and fantasy? Me and fantasy, like, you know, we're like this, except for I can't describe it. I'm bad at describing it. I don't need to describe it though. I need to describe my feelings about it. So my feelings are that I am enjoying this book. I think the world is interesting. I think that the pacing is pretty decent. I like Vis's character. He has an identity as well that he is kind of trying to keep under wraps. He has his own motivations for sure for accepting the help of the senator guy, and also, you know, of keeping his will to himself. He comes from a place that has only recently ceded their wills, I guess, to the Republic. He is from like an island, I guess, that wasn't always under control, and so he has seen how things have been different in the near past, and he wants things to not be the way that they are back home, and he wants his life to be a certain way. So he's a character who I think is easy to sympathize with. I feel like I'm really tuned in. I put this audiobook on this morning, and I wasn't expecting to get very far into it because I knew I wanted to finish this book first. Decided to pick up The Will of the Many and just listen to it for like an hour until I like fully woke up and could finish this. I also had to go to Costco this morning, so I was like, I'll plug this in. I did not want to stop listening to it. It was just really propulsive and entertaining, and just something that I wanted to listen to. So I think that's how I'm feeling about it. It's like fun, it's entertaining, it is just as good as people said that it would be. I don't know what I expected from it. I think from the cover, I didn't expect it to be this like accessible, semi-dark academia with like a younger hero. He's like 17. I don't know if I said that, but like orphan, you would assume he is under the age of 18 if he is still like in a foster care / like, you know, group home setting. But yeah, our main character is younger, and he has a lot put on him. There's a lot of like plot things that have happened too that are entertaining, but I don't want to spoil for you, so I'm not going to. But so far so good. We have far too much to talk about, my friends. Let's get it poppin' though with The Will of the Many by James Islington. This man. I enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. The ending of this book was kind of wild, cliffhangery, and just totally unexpected. I'm obviously not going to spoil the plot of this book because it's a fantasy. There are some mystery elements involved. Not in the same way that we experienced mystery whenever I was reading The Tainted Cup, but there is, you know, there are questions at play, you know, like who done it and who killed off that one man's brother, by the way, not friend, brother. I determined that, did figure that out the farther that I got into the book. So really liked this. I really liked the characters. I liked this world. Unique and original, but in a way that wasn't challenging to understand. And I just am genuinely so curious about the next book in the series, like where we're going from here and how big this world is going to get. There's definitely some unanswered questions that I need the answers to, so I probably will continue on with the series. You know, I always say that, and then I inevitably just don't pick up the next books because fantasy. Maybe you can convince me to read it when the second book comes out. So yeah, I did enjoy this book. I think I'd give it 4 stars. It wasn't perfect for me, but I did really like it. I think I like fantasy with maybe more characters is maybe like my complaint. I don't know that I feel like I'm just searching for complaints here. I liked it, but it wasn't perfect for me, if that makes sense. Like I can't exactly put my finger on it, but I think you know the difference between a 4 and a 5 star book when you read it. I very thoroughly enjoyed this, but it wasn't perfect. And that is not a very good way of being critical, but I think I'm gonna leave it there. Because we have so much more to talk about. First, let's talk about Intermezzo. I didn't even pick this up. I'm gonna be honest with you. I am treating this video, as I said in the beginning, as sort of like self-care, right? Like I love picking up your favorite books. It gives me an opportunity to step outside of my comfort zone, but I think it's also wise to know what works for you as a reader and to not necessarily pick up books that you think you're going to really hate. And frankly, I didn't want to give this book a try because I have not liked a single Sally Rooney book, and I have read at this point, I think all of them but this one. And I don't know, I just don't find that changing. I didn't really want to read about grief, and I think I'm okay with that. So I'm so sorry if you were dying for my thoughts on this book, but let's be honest, it probably would have just been me saying over and over again, it's just not for me. It's not for me. These characters aren't really doing anything, because that's what Sally Rooney's books are about. And you know what? I respect what she does. I really do. I feel like I saw a quote or a vibe or whatever from an interview from her recently that was saying something to the effect of, she doesn't feel like she needs to reinvent the wheel when she writes books, and she doesn't care if all of her books are similar. Why is the assumption that every author has to outdo themselves with each book that they publish? Can they not just publish what they're comfortable writing and what they enjoy writing? I'm summarizing. I haven't actually read the interview, but that's kind of the vibe that I've picked up on, and you know what? I respect that. I respect knowing what you like and writing that, because it's very clear that there are a lot of people who relate to her characters and who really vibe with this end of storytelling. It's just simply not for me, and I'm okay with not reading it. There's still more. There's 2 more things we have to talk about. First is a book that I finished in its totality at the very beginning of this video and never talked to you about, and that would be Somebody to Build a Nest In, or something like that. It looks like this. This book was crazy. This book was cuckoo bananas. This book's about our main character, Shisheshin. She is a monster who has been living in, I don't want to say a dungeon, but like her lair, I guess, which is at the bottom of a fancy estate, I think, or like an abandoned castle, something to that effect. And at the beginning of the book, there are people who are trying to hunt this monster because this monster has been, you know, terrorizing them, supposedly. You know, Shisheshin claims she's innocent. She hasn't really done anything bad, but she does eat people, to be fair. So anyway, she is kind of amorphous at the beginning of the story until she starts like hitting metal and shit to create a skeleton and to have the appearance of a human. When she is hunted out of her home, she ends up coming across a human woman named Homily. Kind of falls for this human woman. She's like, you're beautiful and I want to lay my eggs inside of you. Eggs that will devour you from the inside out. Well, I mean, she says it. She doesn't say this out loud. She's not trying to scare Homily, okay? But she has this vibe. She's like, I like this woman and this is what I want to do to her, you know? As the story carries on, she realizes, you know, maybe I don't want that for her, and maybe I don't want my eggs to kill her because I want her to be around. That's, you know, that's how this romance kind of starts. Anyway, things get complicated when Shisheshin learns that Homily's family doesn't like her doesn't like monsters, and they believe that Shisheshin has cursed them. They obviously don't know Shisheshin's identity. That's kind of the point of the story. But she is trying to figure out why they think they've been cursed by her. And, we find out why that is, obviously, as the book carries on, and she falls deeper in love with Homily. And, you know, this was so weird. This was so fucking weird. It was part sapphic romance. It was part horror. It was very bizarre. It's a book that's like gory without being too gross. It is a book that is romantic without being necessarily a romance. It's a weird one. It is a weird one, and I don't know how I feel about it, frankly. And I think maybe that's why I struggled to give you a 50% update and struggled to give you an update when I was finished with it, because one of those books that I think has found its audience for sure. I know that a lot of my subscribers, y'all are into weird shit, and I respect that, actually. I really do. I think that, you know, there are books out there for everyone, and some of y'all are just looking for the most inventive, most creative things. And I think this does a really good job of marrying two genres that are kind of becoming, I don't want to say more popular, but sort of, you know, which is horror, which has always been around, obviously, and then coziness. This book, though it is horror, has a sapphic romance, and it is shockingly cozy. The amount of like weird plot lines and gore that happens, like it's kind of a cozy book. So it's like, I respect it. I do respect it. I don't think this is for me necessarily. I don't know that I would have picked this up on my own. In fact, I know I know I wouldn't have, but it's a book that I'm not upset having read, and I'm sort of glad that I've read it, so that now if anyone's like, hey, do you have a sapphic horror monster recommendation for me? I could definitely give you this as a recommendation. Not that anyone would really come to me for that. Not that anyone really comes to me for recommendations other than romance, but you know, this book exists. We're on the final book. We are on the final book, which is called Bloom by Delilah something or other. I'll put a picture of it right here. This is the only book I've been suspicious of. When I do videos like this, I use Google Forms to ask for recommendations, and often I am not suspicious of the recommendations, especially if it is a really popular book. Like if I get 100 recommendations for the same book, I can assume there might be some repeats, like somebody submitting the same recommendation multiple times. Often if it's like, you know, a ton of different recommendations submitted at different times, like I know that y'all aren't fucking with me. This book, it's the only one for some reason I'm suspicious of, because I've never heard of this book. Yeah, I mean, that's not really reason enough, I guess, but I was suspicious. Let's just put it that way. Didn't know what the fuck this was. I still don't know what it is. It's weird. Okay, I'm clearly at a loss for words today. This book is about our main characters, Rosemary, aka Ro, and Ash. Rosemary has moved to a town where she is teaching after a breakup, and she comes across a really beautiful woman at a farmer's market who makes her own bread, cupcakes, has plants that she's selling, homemade soaps, things like this. And she's a very crafty woman, Ash is. And Ro has never been attracted to women before, but is just kind of instantly drawn in by Ash and her charming personality, and they both seem to, you know, have a vibe going on. Like they both seem to like each other kind of seemingly from the start, and they take their romance from the farmer's market to Ash's house, where Ro is going to pick out a plant, I guess, another snake plant to bring home to take care of. And while she's there, you know, they kind of hit it off. They're going to date, kind of. So Ro ends up returning and having dinner with Ash. Are a little suspicious and a little weird, right? And this was kind of pitched, I want to say, as like sapphic. It was horror or thriller, but I got the vibe before picking up this book that was what this was. And I think even if you don't know what this book is going into it, you can pick up on the vibes pretty quickly that things a little bit odd. And I don't want to tell you what exactly is odd, because that's sort of the portion of this that's interesting. But let's just say there's some things that are kind of raising my hackles as I'm reading this. Thoughts and feelings, am I enjoying this? I think kind of. Here's the thing, I don't think the writing of this book is particularly great. From the beginning, I was kind of like, what is this? It's like told in third person. It's a very close third person, and it's not giving like super eloquent vibes, kind of like me filming this clip right now, not giving super eloquent vibes. But I think once you get into the story a ways, you're not thinking about the writing too much. I would say beyond the writing, I think that I'm tentatively enjoying this, though I will say I'm a little like questioning of Ro's behavior. She seems to not understand the idea of stranger danger, especially considering her bad relationship she just got out of, where he cheated on her. I'm not saying that like because someone cheated on you, you shouldn't have stranger danger at the forefront of your mind. Like they're not necessarily associated. It just seems like maybe she doesn't have judgment. I just want to tell her, run girl, because this girl's scary. Ash is. I don't know if I trust Ash. I finished Bloom, and oh my god, that was truly a horror novel. I cannot decide how I feel about this one, to be honest with you. I don't think that I enjoyed it. I think that it was gruesome and gross and just simply not for me, but I can admit that it was fairly well done. Again, aside from the writing, which I had issues with at the beginning of the book, like I think the writing was a little bit bizarre. You never really felt close enough to the characters to really give a shit about them, but I feel like the author did accomplish what she was setting out to do. So like for that, I say like hats off to you, but this is just like so deeply not for me. And whenever I sat down to try and rank the books that I read, I realized like for me, horror is just it's not a top genre for me. And if I do enjoy a horror book, it's typically not these kinds of horror books that are very like gruesome and gory and not for me. But when I sat down to rank books, I think this is the most successful time I've ever had reading your favorite books. I did not give a single book less than 3 stars. Literally never happens. I'm gonna give this book 3 stars for the record. I think it was good, just like not good for me. And that's kind of what I'm resorting to lately with my ratings. Like if it's truly not good and I truly hated it, I'll get like a 1 or a 2 star. Aside from that, like if a book is just solid and the genre is not perfect for me, like it's a 3-star read, you know? Like it did what it set out to do. So do you want to know my final rankings? Do you want to know my final rankings, my final thoughts? Okay, let me tell you before I go. First, The Sunshine Court. If you are a fan of the original trilogy, if you love the All for the Game series, it was so good. Like genuinely so good. And I want to get more books in the series. I want to go back and reread the original 3 because this evoked feelings in me that I hadn't felt in so long. You know, those feelings you get when you read a really good fan fiction or you're just so deeply invested in a TV show or a book series. I was thinking about this, and I don't know if I said it in this video, but I am so jealous of people who went to the midnight release of Onyx Storm. I don't like that series, so like I wasn't gonna go and do something like that, but I love that exists, and I hope one day in the near future there's a series that exists that gets hyped and popular as like a nice midnight release that I can go to for like a book that I like. You know what I mean? Like I hope that's in my future because I haven't gotten to do that and it sounds so fun. I'm just jealous of that, I guess. Anyway, this evoked feelings in me. I liked it. If there was a midnight release for the next book in this year, I would go. Okay. Sunshine Court, number 1. Number 2, I have it right here, The Wedding People by Alison Espich. I don't know how to say the last name. This author, this was so good. I genuinely enjoyed this. And I think that if you want a good laugh, but you also are looking for some comfort, I think maybe this would work for you. And I say that as someone who has experienced the shit that the person, Phoebe, in this book has experienced. Infertility and just general shittiness. Granted, my husband's not shitty like hers was, but I get it, right? I was expecting not to like this because I didn't really want to read about her infertility, and I was like, your life's deeply depressing, and that's true, but this is very good, and it turned out to be phenomenal, so 5 stars, loved it, great, okay. Moving on to like 4-star territory, The Will of the Many. So good, such a fun fantasy that I want to see more of in the future. Like I want to see more books like this. I need more magical schools, frankly. I was really thinking about that recently and how I had no intention, and I kind of still have no intention of writing something like that, but like maybe in the far future. That sounds so fun, honestly, a magical school. Ugh, love it. The Sword of Kaigen is spot number 4 for me. It was a great book. I wish the ending had been better. I wish it didn't kind of peter out, but like still phenomenal, still definitely worth a read. Love the main character in that one. Ready or Not is going to be my number 5, which surprised me. I thought the romance was going to be like the number 1. It just wasn't for me. Like it wasn't a bad book, but I think the characters irritated me a little too much and there was too much going on, okay? I would be interested in reading another book from this author in the future, and I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I have her sophomore novel on my anticipated list. So number 6, I am going to put Someone You Can Build a Nest In. Yeah, I mean, it was fine. It wasn't my favorite, but it was fine. And I'm actually gonna put Bloom above The Tainted Cup, which feels weird, but I feel like both Bloom and The Tainted Cup, similar vibes there, where I can admit that they're good books, just maybe not the books for me, okay? So they could kind of either go either way, 7 or 8, okay? And then the 2 books I DNF/didn't read, Blue Sisters, Intermezzo, really, really not for me, deeply not for me. And so I feel confident about where I'm leaving those, which is at the bottom. But that's it for me, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun reading your favorite books. This only has me in a different mindset and headspace after reading your faves, because I'm reinvigorated and excited to read again. So it did exactly what I wanted it to do. I'm very pleased, and yeah, had a great time with it. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with my assessment of these books, if you've read them. I guess let me know what your favorite book of 2024 was if I didn't read it. But I love y'all so much. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and before I go, don't forget to go to magicmind.com/chandlerjan to get 45% off the 24-hour pack, which has the focus shots, the sleep shots. I'll see you in the next one.